Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my dream world. I am back with another nostalgia trip episode, which is part of a series where I review a show that I watched as a kid and I see if my opinion has changed or if my opinions have been affected during said rewatch. So far, I've covered the first seasons of Ninjago and My Little Pony, the first three seasons of each, but with this upcoming series that just had a few new seasons be released, I've decided to revisit a cartoon classic, Total Drama Island. Definitely a vibe that's quite different than the shows I've been watching so far, but this was one of my childhood favorites and one that I have been dying to have an excuse to rewatch all the way through for quite a while now. This series is pretty iconic and it's has a pretty active fan base. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of Total Drama stuff pop up on YouTube, but I will say if you haven't seen the whole season of Total Drama Island, the OG season, and you don't want to be spoiled, and you don't want to be spoiled for future seasons, I don't think this video is going to be for you, and that's totally okay. And this video is coming out a little bit later than I expected because I had midterms and I decided that it was a good idea to do 3 shows back to back, so oops. But for those of you that are new to this series, my nostalgia trip videos generally are in podcast format. I'll go through each episode individually and then come to an overall review and opinion in the end. I may use clips from the show to refer to something, but this is not a reaction series. More so a review and a post-watch commentary of the season. Disclaimer, since Total Drama is a more mature show, even though it's technically a kid's show, my content will likely not be as kid-friendly or censored for this episode of my nostalgia trip. Without further ado, let's get into the review. So right off the bat, I just want to get this out of the way. From his intro, we have no idea how psycho Chris McLean actually is. So we get a rundown of the show, how it works, and right away it's pretty obvious that the campers that are going to be in this show have basically been scammed into being tormented. The intros are pretty long, so I'm just going to give a basic lineup for our 22 campers. Beth, the geeky and overly friendly girl. DJ, a big guy with a good heart. Gwen, who quickly realizes she does not want to be there. Jeff, the party guy. Lindsay, the blonde beauty. Also, Chris, ew. We do not stand your comments about Lindsay. Gross. Heather, the mean girl and an icon in the making. Duncan, the bad boy and former juvenile hall delinquent. Also, I totally always forget that Duncan was initially into Heather and Lindsay. Just a little, minor detail if you're really paying attention. We get Tyler, the wipeout jock, Harold, the oddball, Trent, the cool guy with the guitar, and right off the bat we get a little bit of a vibe between Trent and Gwen. We get Bridget, the friendly and clumsy surfer girl, Noah, the sarcastic know-it-all, and we get the queen, Lashana, who is a stereotype but a queen nonetheless, and Harold is immediately into her. So much so that he ends up insulting her and she almost whoops his ass. Thank goodness for DJ because I don't know what the heck Bridget was doing here trying to restrain Lashana. I don't know. Y'all tell me. Then we get Katie and Sadie, the besties, Ezekiel, the homeschool, Cody, the geek, and ladies man, let's say, Eva, the tough girl, Owen, the big upbeat guy, Courtney, the polite and seemingly friendly one. This does not age well for those of you who know. Justin, the hot one. I really have no other way to describe Justin. And Owen, I see you. I see you. And finally, Izzy, the crazy girl. Chris immediately gives the kids a rundown and we figure out how things work. Duncan proceeds to be creepy. Yeah, creepy. And so does Chris. That's all I have to say. Chris assigns the teams and Katie and Sadie are not happy about it because they end up on different teams. And it's weird seeing Courtney being super nice because assuming you've seen the show before, that does not last. Both of these teams are iconic, by the way. I Also did not notice that the duck that's in the confessional segment when they do that little compilation is using Lindsay's lipstick. I always thought it was eating gum. I don't know why, but apparently it was using her lip gloss. But then we start to see more interactions between the campers and we get some iconic lines. I definitely did not understand the communal bathroom joke as a kid, nor the joke about Owen not wanting to sleep near girls. We get an episode with a cockroach and Duncan ends up killing it with an axe. Super extra, but it works, so I'm not complaining. I would have been with Heather and Beth on the top bunk. Also, the cockroach was the one saying help me, which I think is hilarious because I don't know why I never computed that in my brain, but I want to feel bad for it almost, but every time I encounter a cockroach or some kind of bug, I never can handle it. It's kind of bad. We also get our first glimpse at Lindsay and Tyler, which is actually a really cute couple in my opinion. We meet the iconic no BS Chef Hatchet, who serves the nasty food but eats everybody up in this scene and continues to be iconic throughout the series. I would never survive at this camp, by the way, because I refuse to eat food that has a high chance of giving me food poisoning, so I would either starve to death very quickly or quit. Then the campers learn that their first challenge is about to start. This apparently involves diving off of a giant cliff, and ironically, we end up ending this episode with a cliffhanger. I see what they did there. Overall, solid introduction to the series. I do think some of the intros dragged on a little bit too long. Things in this series, in my opinion, really start getting interesting when the contestants begin to react. I think in some of the newer seasons, the introductions worked better since they were shorter, more brief, and we still got a lot of personality out of each character, but those seasons are also shorter in length and have fewer contestants, so it kind of makes sense, so I'm not being too hard, but that's just something I noticed. But yeah, like I said, this is the first episode ever. It's meant to set up the formula, and I think it works. The transition into the first challenge is absolutely gold, but I want to mention that during the version that I was watching, it was censored, so thus I missed GJ's.
Oh,
But we're disregarding this. The next episode starts off right away from where we left off with the challenge, which is now explained. We get a first glimpse of Chris being psychotic because this challenge is clearly not safe. The killer bass go first, and we get a glimpse of each of their capabilities and personalities. DJ and Courtney are the only two that don't jump, and Katie and Sadie beg to be on the same team, so Izzy kindly offers to switch teams, and Chris is like, okay, whatever. The Screaming Gophers go next, and right off the bat, we get the beginning of an iconic rivalry between Lashana and Heather when Heather refuses to jump off the cliff. The two tell each other off, and oh my goodness, I don't think the show would have gotten away with some of these comments today because Heather literally calls Lashana ghetto, and then Lashana proceeds to yeet Heather off of the cliff. And then the rest of the Screaming Gophers follow, once again, some showing their talents, let's say, except for Beth, who also chickens out. And then it all comes down to Owen, who needs to jump to win, and he causes this huge splash, he almost dies, and he loses his swim trunks in the process. But I guess it's all worth it because they get a wheelbarrow for the next challenge and thus don't have to carry their stuff, right? Well, seems good to me. Courtney proceeds to annoy the team by complaining, and Katie and Sadie make a huge mistake peeing on some poison ivy and get rashes. Funny, but this causes the killer bass to fall way behind, and I'd like to know Eva was actually pretty chill during this episode. Obviously, this does not continue, but given the frustrating circumstances, she's surprisingly chill compared to any future appearances. Heather pretends to make nice with Lashana, but then she reveals to Lindsay that she's playing the game, and we see her true colors and the type of character she's going to be for the rest of the season. Some foreshadowing is kind of there between her and Lindsay, too, which is interesting. Courtney tries to take charge and get the killer bass to have a comeback, but it doesn't really work out. The Screaming Gophers dominate, and they win fair and square. And then we get the scene where the killer bass kind of debate who the next person to go should be, and Courtney and DJ seem to be the main targets because they were the only ones that didn't do the challenge, at least according to Duncan. But then Ezekiel proceeds to make some very ignorant and sexist comments, which causes all the girls to turn on him. Honestly, props to Total Drama for having most of the guys and overall show disagree with this viewpoint, even back in 2007. The elimination is a little creepy. At least I found the music a little bit creepy as a kid. And sure enough, the bottom two are Ezekiel and Courtney. And despite Courtney having a poor performance in the challenge and being found overall very annoying, which I agree. Look, I like Courtney as a character. I think she's very entertaining, but she was very annoying this episode. But Ezekiel has shot himself in the foot, and he ends up being the first boot, which causes a huge gag in this series. Like I said, I'm glad Courtney stayed, but looking at the setup of the show, I am a little surprised that she didn't get more votes. I mean, I guess, like, I will note, like, all the girls probably voted for him, so at least one of the guys also would have had to vote for him, so it could have been kind of an even split, but you get my point. Like I said, I enjoy Courtney as a character, but she needs to kind of pick it up. And her ending monologue is very cringy. It does set her up for some of her future appearances. That's all I'll say for now, but you get it. As for personal enjoyment, again, we're still kind of in the setup stage, so it's a little slower paced, but we're beginning to see everyone's personalities and how some people might start to clash. The challenge was also pretty solid for the first episode. It was also one of the most iconic ones, but there's gonna be better ones too. So far, like at this point, I found myself vibing with Izzy, Lashana, and Bridget the most, but that's probably gonna change and fluctuate, so I'm gonna go ahead and continue. Now that I've gotten through the premiere, I'll try to keep my summaries a little shorter. No promises because I talk a lot, but we'll see. Remember how I said that Eva was chill last episode? That is no longer the case. Chris has the kids run a huge lap around camp and then eat a huge hearty meal, and during this process, Heather and Lashana are back to beefing for some reason, which is not very well addressed because so far, like, Heather has been manipulating her, but I guess maybe Lashana peeped her being fake and was just not vibing with her attitude and the fact that she fat-shamed Owen and stuff, so, yeah, but that was a little wonky to me. Also, Noah immediately being fine after seemingly being unconscious when the Gophers think that they've won the challenge is hilarious. It turns out, however, that the challenge is actually trying to stay awake for as long as possible. It's called the Awake-a-thon, and that's why Chris kind of ran the kids down before. But during the challenge, we get some really great dynamics and funny moments. First of all, we get the start of one of my favorite OGTD couples, Gwent. They're absolutely adorable in this episode, and I think their cool guy and lonely yet insightful girl dynamic worked super well. I will never forgive Total Drama Action for ruining this. Like, honestly, when the fan project Total Drama Reunion came out, I low-key started tearing up because of how sweet their interactions were. But that aside, we also get the beginning of Heather's strategy as a villain, where she recruits Beth and Lindsay into an alliance, or basically makes them her minions, and is like, yeah, Lindsay, you can't hook up with Tyler, and like, yeah, just bossy mean girl, Regina George type shiz. Eva drops her MP3 player, so Heather steals it and later uses this to make her look bad. We get Sheep and Ballerina Chef, along with a lot of funny reactions from the campers, which basically sums up the chaotic humor of this show. Like the icon he is, Chef slays in every outfit, and we get crazy moments like Justin painting his eyelids open, Noah's moment with Cody, and the beginning of Duncan bullying Harold plotline. Not to mention Owen sleepwalking completely nude. Disclaimer, I'm not the biggest fan of Owen's like farting and eating trope. It's just not my type of humor. You'll probably hear me remark about this a lot, so Owen stans are probably gonna hate me if they're watching this, but That scene had me like snorting as a kid and to this day. It's wild. But what really carried this episode were the Gwent moments. Super wholesome and natural, maybe a tad bit cheesy, but still likable. Also, the damn fine hat joke during the beaver scene. Was that censored during the Cartoon Network version? Because that was a clever little like sneak in they did there. Um, Also, the little moments of the cameraman nodding and finding Duncan asleep on the toilet was kind of a nice add in. It's a kind of a blink it or miss it moment, but I think it's nice that they took these things into account as if it's a real reality TV show because, yes, it's a parody, but they're filming the TV show is a TV show. So yeah. Eva ends up throwing a tantrum due to her MP3 player being missing, and then when Heather is like, "Oh no, did you lose it?" It just makes her look bad, so she gets put on the chopping block, and Gwen ends up being the last one awake, so the killer bass lose again. Pretty predictable. I think Eva could have been utilized more, but I guess she was always kind of meant to be a throwaway character. To be fair, if somebody started acting psycho like that, I don't care how talented and good at challenges they are, get out. Courtney even says this, which does not age well depending on how you look at it, but my favorite parts of this episode, definitely Heather's manipulation and schemes and Gwent. Good overall episode. It has a lot of iconic moments, but again, it's still just the beginning, so we have more to build off of for now. Next episode kind of starts out with Harold being clowned, which foreshadows the way his character is seen throughout this season. I don't like that he gets bullied, but I hate it when people snore because I have very sensitive hearing, which is why I got noise canceling headphones, which are magic, by the way. I was never able to sleep on a plane until I got noise canceling headphones, and well, we'll see other reasons why I'm not super fond of some of the things that Harold does, but also we'll see some better moments from him, so not a Harold hater. Heather continues to rile up the killer bass. However, I also have to remember that even though the characters are speaking loudly, we kind of have to imagine that they're speaking more discreetly, because assuming they're like mic'd up and you get it. But I think future seasons do a better job at this. Like if Heather announced her alliance out loud like that, she would have been kicked off so fast, or at least Lindsay and Beth would have. And the next challenge up is basically a hardcore dodgeball game. Owen, Cody, and a few other dominate at the game while Tyler and Harold suck at it, and poor Lindsay gets knotted up so fast. I also like that we see small moments of people's personalities, like Jeff comforting Tyler and later being the only one to try to give Harold a chance in the game. Heather also continues to be very anti-Liler, which again is quite rambunctious. Like, you'd think she'd be more discreet about this. Noah proceeds to be quite a bit of a smartass. I'll be the first to say I like Noah. He has great moments, hilarious ones even, but this is definitely his worst season. And throughout this episode, he was just super annoying and definitely deserved to get the boot, by the way. Like, spoiler alert, whatever. If you're gonna slack in a team challenge, nah. He bit himself in the butt. And by the second game, the Gophers are looking like they're gonna get their third W, so desperate measures cause the Bass to wake up Duncan, who agrees to participate when Courtney threatens to vote him off if he doesn't help. Little bit of a side note, Courtney accidentally calls who I think was supposed to be Tyler Trent, but that's just a random thing that I noticed as a kid. And now we get some slapstick comedy like Cody taking a hit to the nuts to save Gwen, and then Gwen and DJ proceeding to knock each other out at the same time. Duncan's strategy causes the Bass to begin to dominate, and the game ends with it being Harold versus Owen. And people are like, oh crap, we're gonna lose. But he turns out to be quite agile, and this gives him the opportunity to win the game for the Bass when he catches the ball that Owen throws at him. Harold, like I said, he has his good moments, despite being a little like gross. I'm just gonna say it. He's kind of gross. And Noah gets the obvious boo for being a poor sport and being rude about it. Deserved. Overall, great episode. I know this is a fan favorite. Personally, it's maybe not in my top, but it's definitely up there for me. It's a very good episode, the best so far. And because it's where we start seeing the dynamics and like the actual like agenda of the show, which I think is fantastic. So this episode kind of starts out with relationship building. We get a little more Lilar, which Heather is like, no, and a little bit of Gwent, though it seems now that Cody has an interest in Gwen too, which becomes a bit of a subplot for a while. The challenge this episode is a talent show, so each team picks 3 people that are going to be judged. Heather takes over for the Gophers, and she notices a budding relationship between Gwen and Trent, so she starts to sabotage them, of course. She gets Lindsay to spy on her, who ends up hooking up with Tyler instead, and Cody starts hitting on Gwen in a really creepy way, like, ew. Sniffing her hair and trying to watch her change. I would have slapped him in the mouth. Like, I'm not a violent person, but I would have popped him in the face, probably. Then again, maybe he'd be the type of guy to take that the wrong way. Trent is a little vanilla. I'm actually not the biggest fan of his character on its own, but it's no contest between the two who you'd pick. Heather then decides to steal Gwen's diary, which she was journaling earlier. And the Bass have a major setback because Bridget tries to hold a handstand and ends up knocking a light onto Courtney, who somehow survives because it's a cartoon. But whatever happened there, Courtney can no longer perform because her violin is broken. And so Bridget takes her place. Bridget and Courtney also have a really cute friendship. I wish we saw more of that. But Bridget, honey, if you're a surfer of all things, you should know that snacking on greasy food before you do something physical, like being upside down in a handstand, is a bad idea. I know Heather was being mean, but she was super right when she said, girl, easy on the chips. Big mistake. We'll see why. With DJ messing up his act and Justin and Trent performing well, the Gophers clearly are pulling ahead, and Bridget makes it worse by barfing on herself and everybody while she's trying to do her handstand. Disclaimer, if y'all have seen my previous videos, you'll know that I have a pretty severe emetophobia, i.e. fear of vomit, so I did kind of have to skip over this scene because it's pretty bad, and I knew it was coming because I've seen the show before. So if I ever say I skipped a scene or I got triggered, that's probably why. So if you hear me remark about that, that is a common trend for me. Heather ends up reading Gwen's diary as her act revealing her incredibly descriptive crush on Trent, which mortifies her. Jeff also ends up breaking his skateboard, which basically seemingly dooms the Bass, so they have to put up Harold. And then we get a super iconic and memorable scene. Harold does an epic beatboxing scene and blows the competition away, once again saving the Killer Bass and giving them the W. Heather doesn't seem to be too worried. She's like, I know I can get through this elimination, but I think her math is wrong, and people have pointed this out before, because there's 10 Gophers now. So 5 votes would make it a tie. So she would need 6 votes, and thus her plot armor begins. I love Heather, or at least love to hate. But let's be real. Regardless, Justin ends up being the boot, which I'm fine with. I mean, he has no personality other than being hot. As of now, this changes later, by the way. But right now, he doesn't have much going for him, so he's an easy early boot. The episode does end on a satisfying note because Gwen borrows Harold's ant farm and then puts them in Harold's bed, or in Heather's bed, sorry, well, H's. Devious and deserved, if you ask me. Overall, this episode's good. It has some fun dynamics, and of course, Harold's iconic beatboxing scene, but there are some better ones, and I think the elimination was whatever. Okay. I used to not care for this episode, and there are some parts of it that are meh, but overall I find it quite funny once it gets going. This challenge is consisting of both teams spending the night in the woods, and everybody must return as a team to win. Again, it's the little details, you can see Heather looking pissed and scratching herself because of the ant farm incident the previous night. Right off the bat, Katie and Sadie stop to get blueberries during the challenge and immediately get separated from the team. Overall, both teams have really funny dynamics throughout the episode. Jeff totally feeling to flirt with Bridget, and the beginning of some Dunkney moments. Izzy scares the crap out of everyone in the bear costume, and Owen freaks out, only to find out the truth when Lashana falls out of the tree, and they figure out it's Izzy. Also, what's with Owen saying stuff like Dear Abby and Holy Lola? I don't know. But some foreshadowing with Duncan's scary story about the psycho with the hook, and Bridget being scared of the woods. DJ also gets a bunny. Not super important for now, but just, DJ has a bunny. Um, Katie and Sadie were definitely the weakest and most annoying part of this episode, but even they have their funny moments. I'm aware this is an unpopular opinion, and I definitely think they were annoying overall, but the Squirrels acting out their argument was very giggle-worthy for me. Bridget ends up accidentally burning down the Bass's tent because she's scared, and this forces them to sleep in the rain. Never say things can't possibly get worse, Courtney. Because they can. And the Gophers get attacked by a real bear and are forced back up the tree, also introducing one of the many iconic bears in this season. And then the Bass lose the challenge because Katie and Sadie come too late together, and Katie gets eliminated. Sadie is extremely upset and they have an emotional farewell, but I didn't feel too much about it. I think it would have been more emotional if they were overall more relevant during the season, but it's still early in the game, so there's not much depth to it. It could have gone either way. I didn't really care for one of them staying over the other. We end on a pretty funny Dunkney moment, which I completely forgot about, by the way, so that was kind of fun to see. Overall, entertaining and funny episode with decent dynamics, but it has some moments that do drag on, which is why it's a little bit lower on my list. Okay, so this next episode I like because every character has at least a little bit of personal focus and fleshing out. Because this episode is about facing fears, and at the end of the day, everybody is afraid of something. The idea of making a challenge surrounded by everyone personally is both terrifying and very evident in actual reality TV, so I think this works in this case. Beth definitely lied about her fear or something because girl didn't even flinch when she had worms. Ugh. Yeah, something fishy there. Worms aren't as bad as other things though, so maybe like it was a certain kind of bug. And Harold to some degree too, though he does end up knocking himself out. So I don't know why he didn't get the point for that though, because he did try to face off with them despite failing. And I'm scared of spiders too, but if Chef came at me in that costume that he wears when he goes after Lashana, I'd probably just start laughing. But Lashana girl, I feel you. I'm so scared of spiders. It's kind of sad. The main focus of this episode, though, is like some Dunkney and Gwent dynamic, which is great. Trent comforts Gwen when she completes her challenge, which is super sweet, but unfortunately he ends up getting chased by a mime, which is his fear, and then Gwen ends up being left buried underground for way longer than she should have been. We also get Courtney comforting Duncan and getting him to complete his challenge, which was sweet. But by the end of the challenge, Courtney is the only one left, and because the Bass are pretty far behind and need extra points, it kind of comes down to her, but she's unable to do so even with Duncan's encouragement, so the Gophers get their W. And I do think that the point system was a little bit off and all over the place, but the Gophers definitely did better, clearly. Tyler ends up getting the boot with it being close between him and Courtney, but despite her being bossy and failing to complete the challenge, I think Courtney encouraging Duncan and DJ may have ended up saving her. Bridget was also on the chopping block, but she's more liked than both of them, so I guess it makes sense. This is the first elimination that actually was a little bit sad and more impactful since Tyler has dynamics with characters like Lindsay. So yeah, good episode. Yeah, pretty solid. This next challenge involves each team canoeing to the dangerous and cursed Boney Island, trek across it, and then create a bonfire. This episode has a lot of fun pairings and dynamics. Cody continues trying to hit on Gwen, which is super annoying. Like I said, I probably would have popped him in the mouth, and while Lindsay and Beth string away with Trent and flirt with him. This also causes the weird on-again, off-again thing with Trent and Gwen, which I'm not a huge fan of. Like, this is a major writing issue that I have with this series, and I'll talk about it more. But we also get the kind of random trio of Harold, Duncan, and Sadie, and then we get more Bridget and Courtney friendship, which I love. And we also learned that Jeff is a total himbo, because DJ is even like, dude, really? And I kind of headcanon DJ as a little bit asexual given his interactions in this series, but I digress. That's just a headcanon. You don't have to agree with me. Um, DJ also tells a story about having a high diving accident, and that's why he's scared of water. An anecdote which I didn't remember, but I thought it was funny. We also get some good moments between Owen and Heather, and Lashana and Izzy. Cody eventually does kind of get in good with Gwen by pitching her to, like, he was like, oh, I'll help you get with Trent, but this kind of backfires because he then tells her, like, oh, I made a bet with Owen, which involves getting your bra. Yeah, he's creepy. I forgot how, like, weird he was in Island. The group gets to Boney Island where they're quickly met with some kind of boar bear beaver hybrid, like a woolly beaver, I don't know. But Cody fends them and these, like, weird bird things off with some bread that he put in his pants. Ew. Okay, I know Cody has some stands out there, and honestly, I get it because he is entertaining, especially in World Tour, but he's just weird and creepy and gross right now, so Trent ends up stepping in quicksand, and Lindsay also ends up getting stuck, and Cody, while knocking himself out, saves them. Jeff ends up getting a splinter, or I don't know. Also, when he's like, leave me behind, and Courtney just, like, straight up leaves. That was so funny. I'm sorry. I saw an edit about it and cracked up so much. To be fair, those splinters hurt. I got one stuck underneath my thumb once when I was a kid, and at Girl Scout camp, and they had to, like, dig it out of my finger. I was not very happy about it. I think I was, like, crying and eating all of the snacks that they gave me to distract me, but whatever. The two groups are trying to make a fire. Beth finds some kind of, like, tiki doll thing, which she decides to keep because she missed the warning about taking stuff off the island and getting cursed. Cody ends up helping Trent talk to Gwen, though at first Trent is like, if you're lying to me, I'm gonna beat your ass. And I was like, damn, Trent, chill. Where did that energy come from? And also, I forgot about Heather's, like, ladies, are you done with your tea party line? Because I've said it a few times, so I think maybe this is where I got it from. DJ also kind of helps Jeff and Bridget, so we have a little bit of wingmanning going on here. Izzy ends up using some kind of fire starter to make a huge fire, and then she's all like, oh yeah, I'm being tracked by the RCMP, which of course nobody takes seriously. She also tells the Bass how to get back since Harold threw their oars in the fire and basically screwed them over, so DJ takes one for the team and gets them back to camp so fast that they crash land. Of course, the team blames Izzy for their loss, and Lashana clearly has not lost her license to murder because she was about to whoop Izzy. But at the elimination, Izzy ends up getting chased away, which is all good and dandy because she probably would have been voted off regardless. The episode ends with Cody discovering that Gwen has left her bra on his bed, and thus he wins his bet with Owen. Bridget also glues her present back together, and Beth's tiki doll is now cursing her. Solid episode, nothing super special about it, but it was good. So at the beginning of this episode, we start to see that Heather is really starting to get on people's nerves, and one of her minions is now starting to question things. The challenge is, like, some campers are playing hunters, some are playing deer, basically defense and offense of some sort of little hide-and-go-seek and paintball game. DJ really shines in this episode, basically morphs into a deer and proceeds to be a deer. In the confession, it's revealed that Cody is entirely bandaged up and in a wheelchair. I don't know if this was supposed to be foreshadowing or if it was an error, but I was definitely confused about that as a kid. I don't know what Bridget's little, like, subplot of being sad about shooting. Like, have you ever played laser tag? It's fun. Even though this one bitch in my group cheated and decided. Never mind. Back to Owen. He kind of proves that he's not the best at stealth due to his quirks, and is also not the best shot because he proceeds to run out of ammo, and then DJ yeets him off of the cliff. WDJ moment, but wow, ruthless and a little out of character, surprisingly. But Beth, in the meanwhile, is just, like, not feeling doing all these favors for Heather and getting nothing in return, especially because she almost gets caught by Chef trying to get Heather some chips. And then when Heather is like, ugh, you dropped them, it's the wrong time, blah, 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 Beth is like, no. Heather tries to get Beth to come crawling back to her, but Beth checks her and honestly kind of eats her up because Heather can do nothing but get angrier. And spoiler alert, Beth does get kicked off the next episode for several reasons, but this was a pretty major blow to Heather's ego, especially considering that she ends up almost getting eliminated as a result and is sweating it for the first time. LaShonda gets involved too, and all four of them get like completely doused by paint. Unfortunately, Cody gets chased down by a bear and gets severely injured. We also get a little Dunkney segment where the two get entangled with their fake antlers, and Courtney kicks Duncan in the balls for the first time in many. This episode's really funny, and we get to see Beth stand up for herself. I know Beth is kind of a mixed bag in the fandom, and she has been kind of meh and irrelevant throughout this season so far, but this brought her some light and gave her some shiny moments, so I liked that. Solid episode, maybe not my favorite, but a good one. Cody's elimination was a little meh. I wasn't super affected by it. However, some of his interactions with Beth were kind of funny, especially when he gets caught in the crossfire with Heather and Beth and just kind of takes the chips and leaves. That was funny. But her like kissing him and then pushing him into the water was whack and weird. Like, I don't know what that decision was. I think they should have just sent him home due to his injury and canceled the elimination, because I think that would have just made more sense overall. First of all, I didn't remember liking this episode so much back in the day, but I did. And I'll continue with, I don't condone bullying, and Duncan really does some punk crap to Harold sometimes, but this time, I find myself kind of siding with him, Jeff, and DJ, because I'm not the cleanest person in the world. I mean, I had cardboard boxes that I literally just cleaned up in my room, but when you're sharing space with somebody, you have to be mindful. It's one thing if, like, my room is a little messy or my bed is a little messy, like my personal space and desk, but if it's getting in other people's space, especially when it comes to hygienic stuff, you're just being dirty, and I will call you out because that's kind of gross. Also, the fact that Harold denies and lies about this makes it very annoying because clearly it's his fault. I mean, I do think that eventually they take it too far, like the hot sauce thing and then like feeding him his own dirty clothes. That's too much. I don't like that. But Harold wasn't exactly in the right. So that's kind of my headspace going into this. What's with Beth being suddenly all scared and meek now? Keep the energy you had last episode, girl, because you were eating her up. Because the only one Heather has at this point is Lindsay. And that results in the Gophers being a complete mess because Owen screws himself over multiple times. Nobody's able to get any work done. Heather's leadership sucks, and they end up shooting themselves in the foot in the end, but I'll rant about that later. Even though the Bass clearly have the better teamwork at this point, there is still a lot of conflict on their side too. Courtney is not super thrilled about being paired with Duncan, and she bitches about it in the confessional, though to be fair, if he doesn't wash his hands, gross, I wouldn't touch the food he touches either. And Jeff steals all of Harold's underwear while everyone else is working, and they sabotage him by dumping water on him and pranking him. Also, what was up with the Dorcahontas comment? Y'all let me know about that, because whoa, this show got away with stuff that they very well might not today. Also, get me a wing person like DJ, because he's great and also way better at reading romantic moments than anyone else, despite being one of the few characters with little to no romantic interaction. Again, giving a little bit ace, a little bit arrow ace, and I love it. Harold ends up being forced to change into his pajamas and eating his own stuff, which even he agrees is gross, and still had the nerve to deny everything, so drastic measures for drastic actions, I guess. I mean, I probably would have just thrown his stuff in the lake or hidden it somewhere, or just the bed thing like they did at the end.
She's done. She's done. Her pool's going to bed tonight. You ready?
Can you tell that I've been watching Bad Girls Club too much? Whatever. Heather ends up getting some karma when she accidentally burns off her eyebrows, and LaShawn and Lindsay throw her makeup bag in the fridge. So now it's time to serve the food, and...
Owen, guard the food. Owen, guard the food.
Owen, guard the food.
LaShawna, I stan you. But Owen guard the food? That was probably the dumbest thing anyone could have done in a competition like this. Owen cannot be trusted to guard delicious food. Look what happened in like 5 minutes max. The Bass sweep this competition, duh. And the Gophers have some pretty feasible options for nomination. Owen for ruining several ingredients and eating the main course, Heather for her terrible leadership, and Beth for the Boney Island Tiki Doll curse, which must have been real because the Gophers have lost 3 challenges in a row at this point. Beth ends up getting the boot. Personally, I probably would have voted for Owen despite everything, but that's a fair elimination if we consider the curse. This episode's great. Good drama on both sides, great dynamics on both sides, people get their karma, all around great. I have to actually probably give it a top spot for now because of that, but we still have more than half the season to go, so let's continue on. At the beginning of the episode, Heather is sick because of getting locked in the fridge. And DJ, remember the bunny that he got about 5 episodes ago? He's now very attached to it, and we get this whole weird inconsistency of Gwen being mad at Trent, but also switching up in the next few episodes. But I do really, really enjoy this episode. It's a series of challenges, and everyone partakes at least a little bit, which is why I enjoy it. This kind of forces a temporary and half-baked truce between characters like Gwen and Heather because at the end of the day, they want to win, though Heather does prank her. And Duncan and DJ probably should have won that first rock climbing challenge, but DJ freaks out when he sees Gwen's undies and falls. So Heather's prank actually ended up doing them a favor. Again, love the little details like the crewman crawling in the background and everybody being like, excuse me. But considering this next cooking challenge that happens with the blowfish and stuff, the Gophers were doomed as soon as Trent actually let Lindsay cook for him. Like, dude, even if this wasn't a poisonous blowfish, I would not trust her to make something for me. Like, he was almost as stupid as she was in this scene, and he proved to be at least decent with food because he was, like, making all the ribs. Like, Trent should have been the one cooking, period. Again, I had to skip this poisoning scene because it's really gross and it would have triggered me pretty bad, but the Bass win that one for sure. Jeff and Bridget go to the lake and they have a cute moment, but then DJ's bunny, who was left in Jeff's care, gets snatched by a rattlesnake and an eagle and a shark. And Bridget, girl, you could have at least helped there instead of just standing there going, oh my gosh, Jeff, grab it. Oh my gosh. Like, girl, you're athletic too. Come on. The next few challenges involve blindfolds, with the first involving Sadie accidentally beating up Courtney by hitting her in the head with apples everywhere. Not just her head, except the one target that she needed to. Owen, being a tank, also probably didn't help the Bass out all that much. Lindsay fails yet another challenge when she is unable to catch Heather and keep her from falling into a pool of jellyfish. Jeff is forced to admit to DJ that his bunny is gone, and it's actually kind of sad, if a little bit overdramatic. But when Courtney wakes up in the infirmary, she sees Duncan luring a rabbit with a carrot. Interesting. The final race happens, DJ and Jeff end up falling behind because DJ is sad about his bunny, but then Jeff gets him to completely, like, snap back into focus when he's like, oh my gosh, look, Duncan found your bunny. Granted, it is a new bunny, but it's super sweet, and this kind of causes Courtney to gain a new kind of attraction towards Duncan. And it gives another layer to Duncan's character. Like, yeah, he's an asshole, and I'm not excusing some of the crappy stuff that he does and says, but he's more than that too, which makes him an interesting character with great dynamics and a lot of dynamic to work with in general. So, honestly, y'all Duncan haters are valid, but don't come at me, especially not this season. Duncan used to be one of my favorites, like top tier. He was like my favorite character growing up. But while I have mixed feelings about him now, and I'll talk about that, I do still stand that in this season he has great dynamics, great character development. I think he really, really was good this season. He also looks directly into the camera after Courtney falsely promises to keep his secret, which is a funny little detail that I never fully processed. But because DJ took off his blindfold during the challenge, the Gophers win, and Sadie ends up getting the boot because of Courtney's vengeance. I really love this episode because it gives us a lot of pairings that we may not have seen otherwise, like Harold and Bridget, etc. And while the elimination is meh, Sadie reunites with Katie, which is cute, and we get an overall good ending with DJ getting a new bunny. And here we are at the iconic Dunkney episode. Dunkney fans, this is probably your favorite. I think this is one of the best episodes in this season, and I know some people think it's a little overrated probably because of the Dunkney stands, but honestly, I really love this episode. It does start out with some Harold bullying, and while I understand where the guys were coming from during If You Can't Take the Heat, this was just straight up bullying, and it continues throughout the episode, so that's a no-go for me. Again, Duncan's an asshole, not excusing it. This episode is run by Military Chef, who is too iconic for this group of lamos. Try and tell me otherwise. Gwen was even impressed. Other than Chef being iconic and everyone being tested at his boot camp, the main focus of this episode is Duncan and Courtney's relationship. It starts out rocky. Courtney is a rule follower and Duncan is not. That's why they clash. Eventually, Duncan does get in trouble when he pisses off Chef past a certain threshold, so Courtney comes to the boathouse to bring him dinner. They have a conversation, and eventually they decide to go on a heist together to get some real food, because all the food that they're having sucks. So they end up stealing a bunch of food from Chef and Chris, and Courtney learns to let loose, and the whole group has a feast that night. She ends up puking after eating too many cookies, or s'more. I don't know what that was that she was eating, but she ate too many of them. But this is her embracing her bad side, and this next moment would be super cute if she hadn't just puked her guts out prior. But regardless, it was a moment for the Dunkney fans, which I think was very, very well developed up until this point. The next day, Courtney takes her newfound battiness to another stage by getting the giggles and making fun of Chef, and Gwen ends up winning the challenge when Jeff gets too woozy and falls off the tree. To get back at Duncan for bullying him, Harold actually ends up rigging the vote, and Courtney gets kicked off, and Duncan is really upset about it. However, he gives her a present before she leaves, which was actually really cute. Like I said, great episode. I think definitely one of my favorites so far, along with 10, 11, and 12 are all really, really, really great episodes. And the characters have now established dynamics and are much more interesting to watch. The relationships are building, the challenges are getting more interesting. This is a great episode. I stand by that. This next episode involves teams participating in extreme wipeout challenges. The prize is a shower, so of course the girls are all super motivated, and trust me, your girl would be too, because if I don't shower, I don't sleep well. I am actually currently drying my hair. But Gwen and Bridget kind of take a backseat during this episode, and they find this letter directed towards a girl, and they're like, oh, I wonder who wrote it, and then they start arguing. Bridget, what does crunching on someone mean? I know she probably meant to say crushing and maybe my hearing is bad, but that just sounded weird. And also Gwen randomly calls her Betty. I don't know if this is some kind of joke I'm missing, or if Betty was the original Karen, or if it's short for Brit. I don't know. I like Gwen and Bridget's dynamic, actually. Again, that's one friendship that I wish was developed more, but I'm not the biggest fan of it this episode because it ends up being the main focus, and that's kind of dumb. We get some crazy wipeout moments, like Trent once again getting seriously injured. He's basically the pain dummy this season. DJ literally gets swallowed by a couch, and Jeff gets slammed by a moose after showing off his butt tattoo, which is really gross. Lashana ate, as usual, as she should. It comes down to the last challenge, and we get the iconic yet infamous Heather and Harold moment, and Harold ends up wiping out of the challenge completely. Yes, this moment is iconic, but some of y'all are really, really creepy about it. So please note that I will not be showing any images of this part of the episode. The characters are confirmed to be 16, so they are minors, and thus I'm not comfortable showing any nudity, even if it is censored. Somehow, Lindsay ends up dominating the challenge, and the Gophers win. And Lashana also finds Gwen and Bridget and confirms that the note is for her because she's been receiving them this whole time, and that's surprising. Harold gets the boot for losing the challenge and not having a great social game, but before he leaves, he reveals to Lashana that he was the one who was writing her the letters. The two end up sharing a kiss, but then Lashana realizes that Heather has had that moment with Harold, and when the other guys are like, "Ooh, can we see your?" Lashana's like, no, no, and she chases after Heather. Honestly, we've been having a really great run. Like I said, 10 through 12, very strong episodes all around. And I don't think this one quite measures up. I don't know what it was. I just didn't really care for this. Harold does steal the show since the two most iconic moments of this episode surround him. Not a bad episode, but I think it just felt underwhelming compared to the past few. So if y'all have been paying attention, you should know at this point that I don't like vomit, and thus this episode is going to be a rough one. I think this episode is actually what ended up triggering my emetophobia because I've never been able to watch it through again since I was 6 or 7. Like I think I was 7 when I watched it for the first time. And if I ever tried to watch it again, I started feeling sick. So this was my least favorite episode of TD, or at least TDI, for the longest time. But upon rewatch, this is actually a really good episode. At this point, the teams are separated into team girls and team guys because we're now at the top 10. And this challenge is a reward challenge. So we start off with Bridget moving in with the rest of the girls since she's the only female bass left. Heather tries to butter her up and get her to join the alliance, but when she gets into the gopher cabin, Heather and Lashana are fighting. Again, if y'all eat my food or take my stuff without asking, we are going to have problems. So I'm definitely on Lashana's side for obvious reasons. Heather would have been in for it if she ate my snacks. The trash compactor line also was wild because pushing the buttons of somebody who can definitely beat your ass is not a good idea. Bridget ends up getting caught in the middle because she's the peacemaker, but she ends up siding with Lashana and Gwen, rightfully so. I would have too. I don't do fake people because I'm a Taurus. But we then get to the challenge, which involves eating gross food. If I was there, we would have lost. If something has a high possibility of giving me food poisoning, I will not eat it. I don't care. Yes, even if it involves a spa. Like I said, I would not survive here. Honestly, Owen being on the guys' team kind of sealed them the win. Except in the first round, which involved some very special beef meatballs. I definitely did not understand that joke as a kid. This is the kind of thing where you have to forget what you're eating. I respect Bridget's decision to be a vegetarian. I personally am not, but I do eat vegetarian or pescatarian more often than not. In this kind of situation, I can't really say what I would or wouldn't do when presented the food. Also, she claims to eat tuna salad, so is she actually a pescatarian? If anyone has any thoughts about this, go ahead and share it in the comments. But the next one would be rough. Is there a high possibility of me getting food poisoning from crickets and jellyfish? I might eat it. Maybe. But Gwen cracked me up with that cojones line. And Bridget proves to be very helpful during this challenge because she calms Lindsay down and finds out creative ways to eat the food without tasting it. But this also triggers some stomach issues for Trent, so I skipped that whole scene, and I know for a fact that I didn't miss anything important. From here on out, the dishes just get gross and downright unbearable because no, I would have tapped out immediately. The last course involves eating hot dogs with dolphin meat. And while this wouldn't give me food poisoning, I love dolphins, so I gotta side with DJ and Bridget. I ain't eating that. This ends up forcing a tiebreaker between Owen and Lashana. Y'all, they did my girl dirty. There was no way she was gonna beat him. Again, I skipped this entire scene because I genuinely cannot stomach it. So I just skipped right to the end. The guys end up getting the prize, and the girls are more divided than ever. Again, that part isn't very watchable for me all the way through, but this episode has some great character dynamics and lines, so I'm giving it a decent rating compared to what I originally thought. Tensions are continuing to be very high throughout this episode. I also never noticed that Lashana literally, like, took off her shoe like a chancla and knocked the tray out of Owen's hands, and then the shoe boomeranged back to her. That's crazy. And things get even more crazy when the teams completely merge and then Eva and Izzy return. Gotta give respect to Lashana. I know the weave line was certainly a choice, but she ate Eva up. So, yeah, this challenge is kind of fun. Again, it's everybody for themselves. So each of the contestants get highlighted throughout the episode, which is great. Some more than others, but almost all of them nonetheless. We get the whole Gwent and Gwen still being mad about what happened in Phobia Factor. Again, weirdly inconsistent, because just a few episodes ago, Gwen was flirting with him and desperately hoping that those love letters were for her. So, yeah, again, like I said, writing with that kind of thing was very inconsistent, and I don't like it. But they do have some cute moments throughout the episode. It eventually comes down to Eva and Lashana, but also, can we acknowledge that Eva low-key just threatened murder with that toe tag and body bag line? I definitely did not get that as a kid, and I think her tearing up Sasquatch everything also went over my head, and I realized that Lindsay's scene was a little bit of subtle foreshadowing. Maybe that's where she got the idea of, if you know, you know. We'll get there eventually. But Lashana ends up winning the challenge when she outruns a bear on a log, which is low-key kind of cute without fur, not gonna lie. But this causes Eva to get eliminated, except for a few people that voted for Heather. And why the heck was Chef howling? Oh, whatever. We also get a hint from a straitjacket restrained Eva that the campers go somewhere in particular when they're eliminated. More foreshadowing. The episode itself is meh. I don't really care for them bringing in Eva just to eliminate her again, and there were a lot of writing inconsistencies, but there were actually some fun moments and a lot of foreshadowing, so not a bad episode overall. First of all, they did my girl dirty by destroying her prize after one day. Not cool. Second of all, going into this, I know a lot of people do not like this episode, and it's not my favorite either, definitely like bottom 3, but I do have some unpopular opinions about this episode, so hear me out. I will say though, this challenge was dumb, especially since the invincibility prize was seemingly random, but a big chunk of the episode involves Gwen. Trent ends up helping Gwen get her key, and they end up sharing their first kiss. Super cute. But Heather catches on to this, and she's like, we're gonna break them up. And since when did Izzy join Heather's alliance? That was very random and weird, but Heather goes on with her plan. By that I mean she literally fake cries to Trent and kisses him in front of Gwen, which breaks Gwen's heart. Trent, honey, I know you're supposed to be the nice, cool guy, but it's Heather. Like, are you dumb? The answer is yes. He is a cliche, but I digress. This causes the remaining campers to all agree to vote off Heather or Trent, but obviously the main target was Heather. Here's a theory. Here's where my unpopular opinion comes in. I was thinking about this a little bit. In reality TV, which is not real, by the way, there's a lot of fabrication going on there, you have to have a villain. And even if everyone hates the villain, they literally last until the end of the season despite everything. And a lot of the time, this involves working in hand with the producers, because producers love it when people cause drama. So in exchange for good footage, they might hand you out some favors. Why would they send the person that causes the most drama on total drama home? Why would they do that? So I guess my headcanon here a little bit is that Heather made some kind of deal with the producers, i.e. breaking up Gwent, and then in exchange received invincibility. I mean, she doesn't seem super surprised that she won. That's kind of what makes sense to me. So that, like, people say, like, oh, it's lazy writing, Heather has plot on her armor, and, like, I agree with you, and I don't care for this episode as a whole, but people seem to really have a gripe with this part of the episode, so that's just my 2 cents. Things like this do happen in reality TV. So I don't hate that writing choice as much as a lot of people do. Obviously, Trent ends up getting the boot. We get a sweet moment, but honestly, Trent wasn't super important to the plot from here on out, so I don't think that this was a bad place for him to leave. Not my favorite episode, like I said, a weaker one, but I don't hate it. So, a little confession I have to make. This was the first Total Drama Island episode that I watched. Not the first episode of Total Drama I watched ever, but the first episode that I watched from this season in full. Fun fact, thus, even though it's not necessarily one of the best episodes, I think I'm gonna give it a little bit more love than most of the fandom does just because of that. From the start of this episode, we kind of get the first glimpse of Lindsay's relationship with Heather finally beginning to fall apart, which will lead to a certain upcoming moment. Also, poor girl at the end. I never realized she was crying over that nail polish when Heather, slams into her and stuff. But we also get the guys' alliance and one aspect of Duncan that is really great: strategy. So far, Duncan is really the only guy who has actively been strategic. He was one of the strongest members of the BASS team, and at this point, he has made friends with all of the guys, so he uses this to his advantage, and it's a good thing too, because he's not a challenge beast, and he has to rely on social game. Kind of reminds me of Bowie, actually, now that I think about it, but we'll talk. This also brings in a very interesting dynamic with the guys. We get a funny fight scene between Heather and Lashana, and Owen being a little bit bi again. Chef and Izzy's fight is super iconic. And Jeff, honey, that's the tree you picked to climb? Oh dear. A lot of funny moments throughout this episode, and of course, Queen Lashana ate this challenge up. Now, here's where the girls kind of drop the bomb. They are split on voting between Duncan and Owen, which they all should have agreed on because, spoiler alert, those two ended up being the top two guys in the competition. Heather, for someone who was supposed to be strategic, you should have just swallowed your pride and voted for Duncan. Of course, the guys end up voting for Bridget, who ends up getting the boot, but things get a little confusing here. When Jeff says goodbye to Bridget, he claims that he in fact did not vote for Bridget and even ends up getting punished for it by Duncan. So either he lied to Duncan or he lied to Bridget and Duncan at the same time, but let's assume that he didn't lie. We know for a fact that Duncan had 3 votes against him, so Bridget must have had at least one more. Without Jeff, one of the girls would have had to vote for her. And my guess is maybe Heather decided to turn on Bridget out of spite, or Owen maybe convinced Izzy to vote with him, because I can't really picture Izzy voting for Owen. She is the wild card too. Considering that Heather looks shocked at the elimination, and while surprised, Izzy looks a little less shocked, maybe Izzy did vote for Bridget. I don't know. Let me know what y'all think. Also, cute back when Gidget wasn't gross. Overall, solid episode and a big nostalgia trip for me. I still remember watching this for the first time about 12 years ago. So yeah, high ranking from me. Aha. Major classic of this season for a reason. So, as we've established, Lindsay is kind of starting to question her relationship with Heather, and this episode also has some great moments, like DJ not knowing how to ride a bike and thus being terrified, and then Izzy taking Lashana on an unhinged joyride. But regardless, Jeff's ambiguous mourning of Bridget's elimination is a little weird, because he specifically says, like, I should have made them vote for something else. Or for someone else, and so I'm assuming that he's saying that he didn't vote for her, but it's just very confusing. Again, leave your thoughts in the comments. I also love how Chris was kind of just like, we don't need Izzy and Lashana, and the challenge just goes on without them. I also love that in the first round of the challenge, when Duncan is like super hyped riding Lindsay's like Sunset Sally bike, and then Jeff, DJ, and Heather all wipe out because Jeff forgot to bolt down his bike. And then Owen like zooms across the island. Like, it was funny. the final round ends up being Heather, Lindsay, Duncan, and Owen. And Heather is like, okay, Lindsay, you're gonna take the bait for me so I can win. And this works because Duncan and Owen end up wiping out and disqualified. And this is where things kind of go to BS. They set my girl Lindsay up. She definitely shouldn't have been eliminated. I also don't understand why coming in first matters if the last person to cross the line gets cut regardless. Like, did they mean invincibility for the rest of the week? Because if so, that makes sense. But yeah, I'm a little confused. The wording was just weird to me. We get then one of the most iconic scenes in this season and in the series, honestly, as a whole, because Heather kind of reveals that she never really cared about Lindsay. She just wanted her to get her head in the game. So with this ball dropped, Lindsay goes off. This is one of the most brutal roasts in cartoon history, if you ask me. The dumb blonde finally stops being a lapdog, and she roasts you that badly. You know you messed up. And Heather, you deserved it so much. Was invincibility really worth that? Because now you have no one to turn to. I think this could have been more effective if it was even a little bit further into the game, because from here on out, Heather does start having some serious, like, slip-bys. So yeah. Overall, the episode is fine, but it's the ending that's really the memorable part. And is also the only, like, main highlight of this episode. But Lindsay left her mark fantastically and really becomes her own here, so I love that. So this episode is a little different than the others in the sense that the challenge is more so, like, figured out rather than explained. Since the episode starts with everyone watching a horror movie, they become quite surprised when Chef and Chris leave in a rush and leave behind a newspaper of a psycho killer on the loose, which is exactly what the movie they were watching was about. Heather kind of had it nailed down right from the start, but of course everyone starts freaking out and planning just in case. Gwen and Duncan kind of take charge as the horror movie experts, but Owen and Izzy have already gone off on their own, and Heather is alone in the shower. Owen starts freaking out when he realizes that he and Izzy are in a dangerous situation, but they start making out, which allows a masked man with a chainsaw to try to kill them. At least that's what it looks like. I know the scene is kind of stupid, but Ozzy's dynamic is really funny, and I love that it mirrors a lot of horror movie tropes despite being a comedy. I'm talking about the episode overall. Owen ends up throwing Izzy at the masked guy, but the two make it to a nearby tent, and it's revealed that Chris is just chilling and the guy with the mask is just Chef punking them. Izzy is not happy about this, rightfully so. DJ, Jeff, and Heather are the next victims, and we get the amazing scene of DJ running around the entire island screaming. That scene will never fail to crack me up. Heather and Jeff getting taken out isn't as funny, but it's very in character for them, so I love it. Only Duncan and Gwen end up being left, so when the two get separated, they each have a showdown as the horror movie experts. Duncan actually manages to defeat Chef after several close calls, but the whole group observes Gwen talking to some, like, masked guy, and they realize, like, holy crap, that's the real psycho. Funnily enough, Gwen actually whooped him by kicking him in the face, like, 5 times, and he's just like, oh my gosh, why did you do that? That was so offensive. Like, as if he didn't just try to murder her. If you try to slash me, I'm probably either gonna run away or kick you, and probably die in the process, but whatever. Unfortunately, due to doing the worst in the challenge, DJ ends up getting the boot, which is super sad because he's honestly one of my favorites. But can we appreciate that the man never seemed to get a vote against him? I mean, even Heather's was sad that he was gone, or, like, ran up to hug him. Maybe an unpopular opinion, but I love this episode. It's so rewatchable and unique compared to a lot of the other episodes with its challenge. And each character has a shining moment and is relevant in some way, except for maybe Jeff. But there are great dynamics, a lot of funny moments. I love the mesh of horror and comedy here. This is an episode that I would watch if I just was like, I want to watch an episode of TDI. And I love revisiting it. Amongst my favorites of the season, for sure. The elimination is sad, but I still love the episode overall. Okay, see, this episode has proper continuity when it comes to Izzy still being pissed with Owen for nearly leaving her for dead. Also, not Gwen totally air drying Owen's weight. Dang. Also, not sure if they would have gotten away with that comment today. This is an episode that I always forget about. I mean, it's meshed between two of my favorites, so I guess in some ways I feel like it gets overshadowed, but it's not bad. I like that the show acknowledges how close we are to the end, and I like that it also acknowledges that there are different types of reality TV shows. In elimination games like this, it usually comes down to a vote or some crazy challenge. I think in House of Villains, the people who were eliminated vote on who they think deserves the win the most, while in other shows like Bad Girls Club All Star Battle, it comes down to like a grueling final challenge where the winner gets a cash prize. TD is basically a parody of Survivor, so it makes sense that they think that things will come down to a vote in the end. But as for the episode, it's fun. Each camper has their shining moments, and we get a really fun duo between Duncan and Heather. And I love that because they're the two main strategists left in the competition. Duncan acknowledges this and they're like, okay, let's work together. Because for once, Heather actually ends up being the one that's kind of manipulated in this scenario. So that was neat to see. She does end up getting shot in the butt by Izzy's tranquilizer dart, though, which is hilarious. We're also not going to acknowledge that Duncan calls Heather hot. And Owen, you did my girl Gwen dirty. You think he would appreciate her prize more? I would have whooped his ass so bad. I mean, I know I'm probably like a quarter of his size, but it's a cartoon. I'd find a way. He does get his karma, though, so maybe I'll just lay off. Because the animals jump him. Whatever. Especially the frog. He did Lashana dirty. The animals are savage. And Heather sassing that bear was both hilarious and very stupid. Not to mention Duncan getting jumped by I was gonna say herd, but I think it's called plethora. A plethora of raccoons. I don't know. I also love the raccoon and the duck just like sitting and casually chatting after they end up in the cage together. However, Izzy gets the boot for going too crazy. I love Izzy actually, but she kind of deserved that. But didn't Gwen win? So why is she up for elimination? Whatever. We start seeing the serious Heather plot armor. So yeah, I can see why people get annoyed with this at this point, but let's be real, the show would be boring without her, so I'm not gonna complain too much. Okay, first of all, what the heck was that opener? Because that was wild and I definitely didn't remember that. But regardless, this is one of my favorite episodes of the season. I think actually my favorite and super underrated. I'll dive deeper into this, but we get three unlikely pairs and thus some really great development and dynamics, which we know I love. These pairs are forced to be handcuffed together. We were in for it from the start. We get a rundown of how each remaining of the campers are doing. They're paired up. Trials begin. Each of the partnerships start out rocky, except for surprisingly Owen and Heather, because it's pretty obvious who would be eating the food in this challenge out of the two of them. I mean, if Owen could win the brunch of disgustingness challenge, he can handle this, but shoving the entire tray down his throat and still being forced to be handcuffed together turns out to be a tad bit of an inconvenience.
Speaking of teamwork, how are you with toilet paper?
Like I said, the fart humor isn't really my thing. I just think it's kind of gross, but that was hilarious, especially since Heather is being weirdly nice to Owen, at least by her standards, though it is implied that this is to save face if it comes down to a vote. So when it comes down to the challenge, I got a little confused because when I learned how to canoe at summer camp, usually the person in the back was the one who steered unless we were turning the boat because it would act as like a rudder. So I was always a little confused about Lashana and Duncan arguing about who's going to sit in the front, whatever. Also, their dynamic is extremely iconic and underrated, so yeah. Lashana reads Duncan for getting DJ a new bunny, and Duncan's like, okay, I had this dog, and he ran away, and I didn't want DJ to go through with that. Like I said, jerk with a heart of gold, but I actually don't equate that trope to Duncan because he's a bully. We see it in multiple seasons, but I like that there are layers to his character because if there weren't, his dynamics with characters like Lashana wouldn't be interesting, and that's why I love this episode. Not vibing with the fat shaming though, and Duncan deserved that ass whooping that he got when they reached the island. Gwen and Jeff end up reaching a boiling point when Gwen's impatience towards Jeff's himbo and like endless optimism reaches its limit, and she throws his camera in the ocean, which is not cool. To be honest, I don't really vibe with guys like Jeff. It's not that I don't like him or I don't like them. I'm just more introverted and parties aren't really my scene. So I feel like Jeff would be a guy that I'd be like, hey man, what's up? Like, you're cool and stuff. But I wouldn't hang out with him that much. So I do relate to Gwen a lot. And I really like her this season, but she was just being kind of rude and nasty this episode. Jeff kind of confronts her about it, and they have a heart-to-heart, and this was a super underrated and cool friendship. Also, Duncan, just because Lashana whooped your ass doesn't mean she's whooping 3 giant beaver bear-looking things. Gwen and Jeff finish the second challenge the fastest, and they have a fun moment when Gwen finally, like, woohoos and lets loose. Take number insert, but another take of Owen being bye. I also love seeing Lashana stand up for Duncan and for knocking Chris out in the process. Heather kind of shoots herself in the foot by making a rude comment about Izzy, which gives us another hilarious confessional, and Gwen and Jeff fall short behind Lashana and Duncan, which makes anyone eligible for elimination. Again, in the mindset that things do come down to a vote. In the end, Jeff ends up getting the boot. Makes sense, but again, y'all, Heather is right there. I mean, in the end, it's worth it for her to stay, and we'll see why. But I can see why people get annoyed with Heather's plot armor at this point. Jeff and Gwen have a really cute goodbye where she returns his camera and solidifies my love for this platonic relationship, at least for this season. This episode is super interesting as a concept, and honestly, is a really fun episode because we get a little more characterization and dynamics between campers that we didn't see much of. We kind of get a jury house situation here that I mentioned before, common for reality TV voting shows, where the eliminated contestants are hanging out at some kind of like fancy luxury resort and they're watching the show go down. It also gives characters who had less going for them a chance to shine. Prime example being Noah was kind of on the lower end of my list, if we're considering the main episodes, but he has his funny moments, which brought him up on my list. I mean, his "you just peaked" line and revisiting of the no-co moment were comedy gold. Also, he low-key ate Courtney up. The dynamics in this episode are super fun, especially between characters like Izzy and Noah, but poor Bunny. DJ's poor little bunny deserves better. And we get the infamous Lindsay forgetting who Tyler is right after kissing him, and the Gidget and Gidget becoming one of those pure PDA kind of gross, annoying couples. Courtney's still pissed about her elimination, and she wants revenge on Harold, but Lindsay kind of reads her and is like, nobody really liked you that much, so you probably would have been voted off in another episode, which was super funny, and thus Psycho Courtney is born, and we're not going to acknowledge Lindsay's magazine line because that was mildly disturbing and definitely went over my head as a child. Izzy dragging Trent for the Heather thing is straight up facts. I definitely didn't nearly start tearing up during his little sappy speech about Gwen, though. I promise I'm not hating on Trent. I seriously loved Gwent, especially in, like, The Big Sleep and some of those earlier episodes, but Izzy read him. She ate him up. Please don't pee in pools, though, just because they're chlorinated. Please don't. But yeah, everyone even acknowledges, like, why is Heather still here? Not the outcome they would have wanted. Love Bridget being a supportive queen towards both Gwen and Lashana. Put some respect on my girl's name, because just moments later, they do her absolutely bogus. She was robbed. Lashana is a robbed queen. And this kind of knocks the episode down an entire tier for me, because why didn't they just start screaming Heather's name? However, apparently the original concept for this episode might have been even worse. If you don't believe me, look it up on the wiki. Doesn't completely ruin this episode because, again, the dynamics are the main focus of it, and I really enjoyed that. But I will never forgive them for doing my girl like that, because in my opinion, she deserved that W. My unpopular opinion, though, might be that Duncan played the best game this season, but we will discuss that later. So this next episode was one I usually skipped because I never found it that engaging or plot oriented. There's no challenge, no elimination of a camper. Note that I'm specifying campers. I remember bits and pieces, but this will be a nearly blind reaction for me in this perspective. So there's a ridiculous amount of rain in this episode, and it basically causes a flash flood of some sorts, and the remaining contestants have floated away and are now in the middle of nowhere. Of course, everyone starts bickering almost immediately, and we really start to see the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how psycho Chris actually is. Hence the name of the episode. We also get a Wilson-type character with the ever-iconic Mr. Coconut, because Owen eats a bunch of prop coconuts and goes insane. Overall, not much happens plot-wise. We do get some really funny dynamics, especially since Heather starts breaking down in the confessional when Gwen and Duncan almost abandon her. But everybody ends up in Heather's tree cabin that she found, and they start to blow up. Definitely did not catch that jiggy line during my original watch, because that was wild. Everybody thinks they're gonna die, so they just end up like confessing a bunch of crazy things. We never learn about these things, but apparently it was juicy. Owen ends up spotting smoke from a fire, and they find their way back to Chris and Chef. Mr. Coconut ends up getting eliminated, much to Owen's devastation. But overall, I can see why I just didn't rewatch this episode very often. If I'm gonna be honest, I don't hate it. I don't even dislike it, but it just feels so irrelevant compared to everything else. It also has some fun dynamics and lines, but otherwise it doesn't bring much to the table, and thus ends up at the bottom of my ranking. Once again, for this episode, the remaining contestants end up waking up in the middle of nowhere, and we find out that Chef is in charge of this challenge, which is another forest-based challenge. A little underwhelming, but I think the dialogue and interactions make up for it a little bit. The girls and the guys are separated into teams, and to see who survives the night and makes it back to camp first wins. Owen is terrible at reading maps, and it comes back to bite them in the butts when the guys start gloating towards the girls, and they're like, no, you're going the wrong way. I also love that they think that Chef is the psycho one in comparison to Chris. We get a compilation of the two teams going back and forth. Again, neat seeing characters like Gwen and Heather working together when they have to. However, once night falls, Sasquatch pops up and scares everybody, resulting in a very funny series of events. The girls end up manipulating guys into thinking like, oh, let them think that they're winning, and then like dip. I wonder how Courtney felt about that little like Heather and Duncan moment. The guys wake up, they find out the girls have totally punked them. Owen ends up smelling some sticky buns that Chef was making, causing him to go into his hunger frenzy self, but instead of tagging the totem pole like he's supposed to, he goes right for the snacks, and the girls win the game. Owen is clueless as to why Duncan is pissed. And I actually really do not like this ending, especially because the stakes should be super high at this point, but as expected, Duncan gets eliminated. Both of my top deserving contenders were eliminated back to back, but hey, I would have done the same. We also get a great platonic Duncan interaction. Mind you, I said platonic, so don't come at me. We end with Heather trying to save face, Gwen being surprised that she's made it so far, and Owen being all fun, loving, and happy. Very solid final three trio. Remember how I said the only thing going for last episode was the character interactions? I think this episode is along similar lines. I like it slightly better, but considering that it's a Final Four episode, it's a little underwhelming and is probably also on the lower end of my tier list. Oh boy, here we are, Final Three, and the episode has one of the most iconic TD eliminations and takedowns. Heather is like talking up how she's the obvious winner. Gwen is over the drama and wants Heather to lose, and Owen's just happy to eat pancakes. Once we reach the challenge, it ends up being a ruthless game of dares and more dares, which are provided by the former campers. Some of these dares are extremely gross, and because of my squeamishness, I did have to skip or mute a few of these scenes. Luckily, I hadn't eaten before this, so I was able to stomach most of it, but as much as I enjoyed this episode, it's always been a little rough for me to watch because of this. Owen is the most willing to do something gross, and thus dominates the challenge, while Heather and Gwen attack each other with dares, and yeah. Gwen is absolutely savage. I mean, she roasts Heather multiple times and burps in her face after puking. So savage. I skipped the dog food part. You might have guessed why. We get a dare compilation, and Owen clearly, again, is dominating. So Gwen is kind of like, okay, I gotta pull a move to make sure Heather loses. And now we can see very clearly that Heather's mean girl attitude has seriously backfired on her, because she lands on Lindsay's picture, and the dare is have your head shaved by Chef. Remember this? It's the fact that Lindsay is the one to take Heather down, along with her ego getting the best of her, because just like Gwen said, that makes this next bit oh so satisfying. Because Heather does end up losing all her hair, but she never actually accepted this dare. Double whammy, because she takes the L, because she kicked Chef's hand before he could actually shave her head, thereby not actually completing the dare. This disqualifies her and eliminates her from the game right before the finale, making for the most satisfying elimination in this series. Like, yes, she had it coming. Yes, it in theory should have been earlier, but I think waiting till the end just makes it all the more satisfying. So this episode gets a very high ranking for me. So here's our final two. Very different people, one with endless positivity and one who's a realist and tired of the BS. I am curious as to why Gwen certifies Owen and Cody as sane people, despite trash talking them a lot. You would think that she would replace Trent or Jeff, who were her boyfriend and the guy she became cool with 4 episodes ago. Anyway, everyone is prepping for the final judgment, and Heather attempts to sabotage Gwen with some kind of like laxative cupcake or something. The peanut gallery is pretty split, ready to support both finalists, but when Owen says he wants to spend the money on a huge party, everyone's like, ooh, yeah, party, so they support him. Personally, I'd stay on Team Gwen. I'm a major introvert and not a party person, but that's just me. They do a series of crazy obstacle courses to win the money, and the teams are helping, which gives Owen an advantage. And here's a problem that I have. Oh, excuse me. The writing is extremely inconsistent, because Gwen is angry at Trent and is like super mean to him, shutting him down quickly, which in itself is not a problem, but when Trent was eliminated, she like leaned in to kiss him and was like crying about it. Weird inconsistency that I really don't like. Also, not a huge fan of Trent's. It wasn't my fault. Like, Heather manipulated me. Like, yes, you were manipulated, and that's not your fault, but you still kissed her. Like, come on, man. You could do better than that. He does prove to be helpful, though, so I'll give him that. Chris, you are a psycho for casually letting interns die testing dangerous challenges. Unless he was joking, which is also pretty psycho, because joking about people dying is not funny. We also get some Dunkney drama, which is more cringy than I remember. Heather continues her sabotage by partially undressing Justin, and it turns out that Gwen gave Owen the laxative cupcake Heather intended for her, and it kicks in. Trent starts doing this really weird display by carrying a boulder to prove his feelings, which I thought was pretty corny. And Gwen even is like, that's kind of dumb. Gwen's in the lead, so Izzy's like, okay, we gotta step it up. So she brings out some brownies and then like has Lindsay use a fan to air the scent towards Owen. And Lashana like yeets Heather in the confessional that Owen just did his business in. So again, more karma for Heather. Um, Izzy's plan works, which causes Gwen to nearly give up, but Trent convinces her to get up and keep trying despite everything. So, if you've seen Total Drama before, most of the seasons have alternate endings. So, this could be different depending on which version you watch. But in the version I watched, Owen misses the finish line to get to the brownies, and Gwen beats him there for the win. Personally, this is my favorite ending. I know that that's an unpopular opinion, but even Owen says that she deserved it, and I would be happy with both endings. So while this is considered the alternate ending in canon, and Owen's works better narratively considering some continuity stuff, not individual narrative, but like series continuity, Gwen still ends up having the party and everyone's happy. Good ending, happy with the finalists. Gwen, either way, ends up going out with Trent, and both Heather and Chris get some karma. Surprisingly, though, I don't think this was like a top episode for me. It's good and it's a satisfying ending, but I feel like there were more stakes, dynamics, and drama in a lot of the other episodes. Not a letdown, I just don't have it up top. So I did decide to include the special because it leads into Total Drama Action, which is the next season. So in this version that I watched, it does state that Owen is the winner. So we're going to refer to it as such, especially because in future seasons, it's, he's kind of confirmed as the winner. Um, Everyone's chilling. The competition is over. We get some fun interactions. Um, Chris congratulates Owen on his win, but then presents the opportunity to win $1 million if he like ditches the 100K, and then everyone else will have a chance to rush after the money. Of course, this ends up causing a mad dash, and people split up in teams as a result. No one wants to pair up with Harold nor Heather. I mean, even Ezekiel was accepted as long as he agreed to be respectful, and he kept that deal. So cool, cool. Um, Harold tries to win Heather over, and the two end up teaming up, if reluctantly. Also, Jeff and Bridget PDA. Ugh, no, sorry. Um, but things go back and forth. People are backstabbing each other, fighting, ripping, like going after that $1 million. But the end result is the case falling into a lake and getting destroyed. And as for the people that like made it past the dock or something, they're recruited for season 2, Total Drama Action. Basic transition into the second season, it works very well, but the main thing I want to focus on in this episode is the character dynamics, because again, that's my favorite part of the show. Now, I'm not going to cover every interaction because that would make this already long video even longer. But I do love that some relationships get more development, we get new dynamics that we haven't seen yet, and some characters we barely saw shining moments for get some moments. One of my favorite examples of that is Justin, because I had him as the most like boring, early boot, irrelevant character of this season, because up until now he's just been pretty. Um, Up until now, Justin fans, don't come at me. But in this episode, he's quite manipulative and sly. It shows much more personality, so I really enjoyed that. And yes, Trent, Justin is hotter than your vanilla self. My favorite group of this episode was definitely Noah, Izzy, and Eva. Super entertaining and different characters, and we get some like snappy moments between Noah and Eva, which is so funny, but still in character, and we get a more chill version of Eva, which I appreciate. My favorite duo interaction, however, is definitely Harold and Heather. You would expect this to be like super cliche, like nerd makes mean girl nicer or whatever, but it's very interesting as they start interacting. Because Heather treats him like crap, but Harold, even though he stands up for himself, like has endless patience and is still willing to like reach out to her. And we get a really good vulnerability moment for Heather that gives us more depth to her character other than just being mean. And I think these were, yeah, I think they're comparable. I got tongue tied, but I think this works perfectly as a special and as a transition into the next season. So good rating from me. So overall, I really enjoyed this season. I love rewatching this with a fresh perspective, and I haven't rewatched it entirely in a very long time, so I had so much fun. I always held this season as the most iconic and towards the top of my list when it came to TD seasons. Of course, I haven't rewatched the rest of the seasons yet, so we'll get into like comparisons as the time goes on, but I am pretty confident in my assessment. So I don't have much to compare it to, so I'm just going to go right into strengths and weaknesses. My biggest gripe with this season is that it takes a while to amp up. My favorite part, like I've said multiple times now, is the character interactions and dynamics. Yes, there are the challenges, the votes, the eliminations, and the drama, but the drama revolves around the characters. So, with so many of them and so many episodes, I get why it takes a while to get into those deeper interactions, but I found myself getting engaged on another level when it got to like episodes 9 and 10. That's almost about halfway through the season. I don't think anything before that was poorly done. I just think the second half of the season, like starting at episode 9 is like far more engaging, and it makes sense. I mean, this is the original, it's setting things up, but compared to like the rest of the seasons in this franchise and other seasons, I find that generally it's more engaging in the beginning, maybe like does some stuff in the middle and then amps up in the end. This was kind of the opposite. I also think that towards the end of the show they got a little lazy when it comes to writing, and this applies to some of the other eliminations like Heather. Episodes 23 and 4 are kind of towards the bottom of my list, and like I said before, while I like the finale all right, I found other episodes outshining it. So, but overall, there isn't anything about this season that I like hugely griping with. So this is just me nitpicking and pointing out where I noticed some things that maybe weren't my favorite. Like I've mentioned, as for strengths, that this is a very good overall season. There aren't any major things that I disliked, and I think that's why it holds up. And the reason I think that is because of how real and grounded pretty much all of these characters are. Total Drama is known for its stereotypes, and while each character does fit into this stereotypical mold, they're also very clearly people. Maybe amped up for the sake of the show. I mean, that's how reality TV works, but I can see people in real life fitting in as one of these characters, and I think that's why this season works so well. And while I I did mention how the episodes towards the middle are my favorite, I really don't dislike any of these episodes strongly. Even the ones at the bottom of my list, I don't consider them bad. And there's only one that I would consider outright skipping if I ever rewatched again. This goes the same for the characters. None of them are downright bad. Of course, there are the early boots and that just didn't have that much going for them. And there were some characters that were more annoying than others, but I don't feel a strong dislike towards any of them when it comes to character writing, not personality. That's entirely different, because I can dislike a character's personality but still think that they're a good character. For example, Duncan and Courtney. But overall, I think that this season really holds up even in a completely different decade, and it stayed entertaining and well written throughout. So if you haven't seen one of my nostalgia trip videos before this, I usually do favorite episodes, pleasant surprises, or better than I remember episodes, and least favorite episodes. So, but since there are so many, I'm gonna just insert a quick tier list here. They're not entirely in order because I kind of just slapped it together as I went. But yeah, would be my overall. As you can see, I don't really have any bad episodes in there. They're all the worst of them are fine, completely watchable. But yeah, as for my favorites, my top 3 would be the favorite tier: Trial, Triathlon, Hook, Line, and Screamer, and Basics Training. Those are my favorites. I don't know. I just felt like they brought the most. They were engaging throughout, great character dynamics, great consistency. I really, really enjoy it. Those, this is mostly based off of pure personal preference. But I did try to overall rank them based on writing, but the favorites are kind of like my personal favorites of the season. So that's kind of how I would explain the tier list. Some that I would consider like pleasant surprises or better than I remember. Brunch of Disgusting is for sure. Like I said, I used to hate that episode. I'd always skip it, always ignore it. But it, other than like the puking, very, very good in terms of dynamics and creativity. So definitely pleasant surprise. I'd also add in, I think I mentioned this, but If You Can't Take the Heat. I didn't remember liking that episode that much. Like, I never disliked it, but I didn't remember liking it. It would probably be in my top 5, I think. So, yeah, those are two that I wanted to, like, mention. I don't even really want to mention least favorites, because I didn't, like, fully dislike any of these episodes. But Camp Castaways is the only one that I would skip, just because I don't feel like it adds too much to the show as a whole. Like, you can skip it and you don't really miss anything except for maybe a few funny lines and moments, but meh. Again, like in my other series, I do usually rank like the main characters. Like for Ninjago, I rank the ninja. For My Little Pony, I rank the main 6. But Total Drama has such a big cast, and every like season has a different group of focus characters. So here's a tier list of characters, again, not ordered within tiers overall, but this is just, again, I have none in the very bottom. So that's kind of nice. But I would say my top 5, I put Chef in the top just because he's so iconic. But I would say my top 5 characters overall would be Lashana, DJ, Gwen, Heather, and Duncan. DJ is a comfort character for me. I just really, really love him and his overall demeanor and attitude. And the other 4 just contribute so much to this season. So, yeah. I also felt that I'd mention a few characters that I feel different about. I wasn't really vibing with Trent, surprisingly. Like, I know that I'm a Gwen fan, but yeah, I don't know. He was just kind of annoying, hypocritical, didn't really take responsibility for what happened with the whole Heather thing, which I did not like. So that, and he's just kind of boring. Like, he's a nice guy. He's supposed to be the cute guy, which is, he's not really my type. But, yeah, I don't know. I didn't find myself liking him all that much on his own. Like, I don't dislike him, but I think that as like a little kid, I liked him a lot. Now I'm just kind of like, meh. And I also feel like I'd mention Courtney, because I loved Courtney as a kid. I don't know why. Maybe I just liked her like spicy Latina because I was Latina and kind of had the same haircut as her when I was a little kid. So I liked her a lot because I thought she was like badass and stuff, especially in Total Drama Action. But upon rewatch, while I think she's a really, really great character that, you know, it's interesting to watch throughout the series, she's kind of annoying. So she's kind of like one of those ones where my opinion changed. And as for like bottom characters, again, I don't really dislike any of them. They just have less, like the ones that I've put in the lowest tier, they just have less development, less consistency, and they just don't measure up to the other characters in the series, which are overall great. So yeah, I think I've talked for way too long, so I'm gonna end it here. Thank you so much for listening or watching. I really enjoyed experiencing this all over again. I'll be doing seasons 4 of MLP and Ninjago next, and I'll probably do a little bit of a reaction review of Dragon's Rising Season 2 Ninjago, which comes out on April 4th. Where I'm from, at least. Thank you so much for 106 subscribers. I know it doesn't seem like much, but it really, really means a lot to me. Like I said, I'm a full-time student, so videos don't come out as quickly as I would like them to, but I'm still always actively working on a video, even if it's not getting posted. If you have any questions or you'd like me to elaborate on any of the points that I've made, or if you just have like a curious thought, I would love to hear your thoughts. All I ask is that you are respectful of my opinion and of other people's opinions. Disagreements and critiques are perfectly fine. I encourage discussion, but if you're being an asshole or you're being disrespectful or you make an inappropriate comment, I will delete your comment and block you. So please don't do that, because I don't want to do that. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content, and I will see you next time. Keep dreaming!